So before we get on to the main content of the episode, let's have some call-ins.
Hey gents, this is Rudy from RPG Retrofit. I'm really enjoying the fighting fantasy stuff you're doing right now. It's fun to hear about it and learn about it. I played the first few books probably only within like the last 10 years. When I was a kid growing up, I was huge into Choose Your Own Adventure books. Like I read those like crazy. And then I remember TSR had the Endless Quest books. Like they had Star Frontiers, there was a Gamma World one, and then a bunch of D&D ones. And I read those too, but I think if my memory is correct, those are just basically Choose Your Own Adventure style books too. There's no, I don't think you did anything with dice or, but yeah, this is great. It's a fun series. I'm really enjoying it. So thanks guys.
Thanks for the call in, Rudy. Of the four of us, I'm probably the wrong one to be answering this voicemail, but anyway. I started gaming back in the 1980s with the Red Box by Moldvay. And 1982, the Fighting Fantasy books came out. And as I was already gaming with a group, it didn't appeal to me to be solo gaming. And then I fell off the planet when I started full-time work. But I think they are a good introduction to people, especially as youngsters when you don't know what the hobby is and you haven't got a group. So playing some by yourself gets the feel for it and hopefully leads you on to trying to find a group, or these days doing some online play. The only game books that I personally have played is the Fabled Land books, which was, I think they came out in the late 90s, and they too brought out an advanced set of rules so that you could game face to face. But thanks for calling, Rudy. Who have we got up next?
Hey fellas, very pleased to hear your second chosen topic is fighting fantasy, something very close to my heart, and looking forward to hearing more about that. I have to say thanks to Colin for alleviating my anguish when I heard Pete say that Warlock of Firetop Mountain came out in 1992. So I was almost screaming at my phone, I should be there, I should have been there. But yeah, thanks for stepping in there, Colin, and setting the record straight. But looking forward to hearing more about what you've got to say. I've got to say I'm less acquainted with advanced fighting fantasy, and look forward to hearing more thoughts about that.
Thank you for that, Spencer. You wouldn't believe we had show notes for this. Amateurs we are. I actually read 1982, and for somehow me words came mixed up. Or as Colin would say, my words were mixed up. Yeah, hopefully by the time we put this voicemail into one of our episodes, you will have caught our latest episodes on fighting fantasy. So there is plenty of content in there. And that's why we have Colin on the podcast. He's there to correct all our mistakes because he never makes any himself, does he? And with that, let's listen to our final call-in.
Hey, Jason here, Nerds RPG Variety Cast. Just want to say I enjoyed this next episode you've done on fighting fantasy. I'm almost surprised they didn't break the skill down instead of doing adding additional skills to it. Just break it down into like fighting and thinking, and you could break it down to 3 different things. It'd be pretty good, but I don't know. Enjoying the show. Talk to you later. Bye.
Thanks for that, Jason. Yeah, as you alluded to there, what Daniel Sell has done with his Troika leaves the fighting fantasy engine, if I can call it that, wide open to hacking and modifying. So that's certainly one route you can go down with that. Saying that with fighting fantasy, we all 4 of us love the books, but and they're great for reference, but none of us are itching to run the game. Maybe we've got too much else on our plate. So, on behalf of myself and all the other worms, thanks for these call-ins and all the other call-ins we've received. We do really appreciate them. And if you've got something to say about any of our episodes, call in and we'll reply to you.
Okay, welcome back to the Purple Worm. I'm joined by Colin of Spike Pit, Pete Jones of Dragons Are Real, and Dave from D Percentile. I'm John from Red Dice Diaries, and we're going to be talking a little bit about random tables, and in particular focusing on the Black Hack by David Black. So I'm going to turn over to our resident expert who has been recently running Black Hack. Dave, give us a sort of capsule version of what Black Hack is.
All right, thanks, John. So I'll give you a super quick summary. So I'm talking about the second edition of the Black Hack, which was kickstarted fairly recently. I think this got sent out last year. Oh, no, it would have been during this year. So there was an earlier edition. We couldn't exactly date it. It goes back at least to 2016, maybe slightly earlier. The second edition is really quite similar. I think the only significant rules change was the armor rules. Distinctive features of the Black Hack. So all of the rules fit on about 30 pages of A5, beautifully laid out A5 size paper, and it's a roll under system. So your characters are pretty much defined by their 6 traditional attributes, which are rolled down the line, old school style, and yeah, so for everything you want to achieve, whether it's avoiding a trap, whether it's attacking or indeed defending, because the GM rolls no dice, well, certainly doesn't roll to attack, can roll damage dice if you want, but there's also optional fixed damage. And then you have 4 basic classes. You've got the warrior, the thief, the cleric, and the wizard. The class descriptions all fit on one page, so each class has got just a couple of features, 2 or 3 features, which make them distinctive. So the warrior, as the warrior levels up, can do a few more attacks and has a nice shield bash ability. The thief gets advantage on roguish talents, your various thiefy type things, and gets a version of the sneak attack. Clerics and wizards can obviously cast spells. The cleric can banish undead. But it's a really rules-like game. It has some other nice indie touches. So distances are very abstract. It's very easy to play as a theatre of the mind game. It has a wonderful mechanical innovation, which you will have heard about recently on Spike Pit, which is the usage die. The usage die, which can be used for tracking resources. It can be used for duration. And basically that is... instead of having a number of arrows or a number of rounds that an effect lasts, you just have a usage die. So it might be a D4, D6, D8, and so on. And when you need to track depletion, you just roll your usage die, and if it comes up 1 or 2, you replace it with the lower die in the die chain. And then when you roll a 1 or a 2 on a D4, that resource has run out or that effect has ended, which is a really nice mechanic, which I think quite a lot of people are getting excited by in other games. So that's pretty much a summary of the rules. The other really nice feature of the Black Hack in the second edition is that after you've done those sort of 30 pages of rules, you then get a big chunk, twice as much, which is given over to a lovely set of random tables. Quite often they are the, what do you call it, Colin? The handful of dice tables. So you'll have a D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, all on one page, and you roll your handful, and that will generate, for example, your, what's a good example? That will generate your dungeon. So I've got the dungeon generator here, page 64. D4 will give you the entrance. D6 will give you the construction, D8 will give you who built it, D10 will give you what it was originally used for, D12 will give you a feature. I think these tables are beautiful. They give you just enough to be sufficiently suggestive to get the information, to get the imagination flowing. A couple of other nice features. You've got drop tables in here. So instead of creating a village, you just drop your dice onto the map, and that that indicates which of the buildings on the map are occupied and in what way. Similarly, there's one for a what's on the corpse table, beautiful little drop table. You throw your d6s down. If they come up 1 to 4, well, then that's the number of coins that the creature possesses. But if they come up 5 or 6, you look at where they've landed on the page, and that will indicate a nice quirky bit of equipment. So just lots of really gorgeous features like that to give you just enough to get the game going. Really distinctive of the game to me is that it runs really fast. It runs really fast, gets out the way, lets you just get loads of dungeon exploration done. And yeah, as I say, it's my favourite OSR game. That's my summary.
Wow. I wholeheartedly agree with what Dave's saying. For me, if you picked up the box set of the Black Hack, it came with dice, it came with like some sort of spell books, like little spell booklets. It came with a sort of essential rules book, character sheet. It was I know that if I'm in a hurry and I'm going somewhere, if I grab that black box, I've got everything in there. Mm-hmm. And I think it's one of the best box sets of a role-playing game that I own, I've seen, that I know of.
I think it's a very clever rule system because it appeals to indie gamers because it's got some indie ideas in there, but it also appeals to the BX gamers because it's familiar. There's enough there that's familiar. The 6 stats, so it appeals to both sides of the market.
Yeah, it does sort of have that element of being like a bridge between the sort of two, doesn't it?
It does.
That's what I'd call it. I'd call it indie OSR, and I don't mind describing it that way. I think that's it, that captures it pretty well. Yeah, Colin mentioned the spells. Your spells for the wizard, your prayers for the cleric, they fit on 1 page each. You've got complete lists, all the relevant levels. Each spell has a 1-line description. It's all you need.
And when you're level 1, you can cast level 1 spells. When you're level 2, guess what? You can cast level 2 spells. None of this crazy jankiness that you've got to be whatever level to cast another. I've been playing D&D since early doors, and I still can't figure that out. What is that about? I can't cast a 3rd level spell till I'm 5th level or something like that.
and then 2 or 3 paragraphs of description of what the spell is. Who's got time to read all that? Give me a line. Tell me what I do with it. I want to cast sleep. What does it do?
I think that's something certainly with the spells that sort of it's sort of like it's become a bit of a sort of like a system bloat issue as the editions have gone on. So I think sort of in the sort of original versions of D&D, the spells are fairly simple, and it's nice that Black Hack's sort of gone back to that in a way. Whereas I think sort of later editions, which don't get me wrong, they do have their good points, but the spells are a lot more, the descriptions are a lot more sort of, I suppose, fuller. Like they try and cover every sort of eventuality, whereas, to be honest, I sort of think, if you've got a GM in a game, you don't really need all of that, because as long as the GM's comfortable with sort of interpreting it.
And the other thing I love about the Black Hack is, as a GM, is the monster descriptions. Simple, quick stats and what they do, not pages and pages of special abilities. You can just have a quick look and you know what it does.
Yeah, and then there's a little table for what you catch them doing, isn't there? There's a table for what they're in the middle of.
Yeah, what they're doing.
Yeah, they're slightly different depending on the monster, but basically you've got a table for what you catch them up to, and then what they might be mucking about with, what else might be in their lair. Fantastic, and this is what I like about it. I don't want to go back to those sorts of modules where you have these big long room descriptions where actually there's probably there's 2 or 3 things in those room descriptions that are going to be relevant. That's all the players need. That's all the players can actually cope with anyway. So the Black Hack just encourages you to bullet point that. Right there, you go. That's what So you've got tables for room dressing, tables for what's in empty rooms. That's all you need. Just 2, maximum 3 details for the players. And they can get on with it.
Right, I'm going to play devil's advocate now. when the Black Hat came out, the biggest talking point was the usage dice, and lots of other games have sort of adapted it.
Yeah.
But I read on one of the forums, somebody asked an explanation of the usage dice, and it was explained that you roll the dice, and if it's a 1 or 2, you step down to the next dice, and it's a diminishing one of your supplies. So someone said, well, what's the difference between doing that and just recording each time you take a swig of water? Instead of you recording how many uses you've had, you're just counting which dice I've got.
Because you don't know when it's gonna. There's an element of the unknown that builds a little bit of suspense in with a usage die. Because you go into a combat with a quiver of arrows with a usage die of 6, at the end of the combat, you're going to roll that die. You don't know. It may stay the same. You may stay at a 6. If you roll a 1 or a 2, your arrows are dropped down to 4. So you've expended a significant amount.
So what you're saying is it's not reducing the administration, but it's adding the uncertainty, which is...
No, there's a couple more things. There's a couple more things to that. I mean, the first thing to support what Colin said, I remember in the, Legolas in the Lord of the Rings, right? There's no flies on that guy, right? But even in The Hobbit, there is a moment in The Hobbit where Legolas goes for an arrow, and he's like, "Oh shit, I'm out of arrows." Yeah, he even surprises himself. So it captures some of that. In a battle, you're not fighting. You're not counting all your individual arrows. So there is a nice kind of surprise that you've run out of stuff. So that's quite nice. So and the uncertainty. That's not just remember with resources; it's with durations. Instead of, I remember in 5th edition, there's loads of 10-round effects that you've got to remember to track. As a GM, I was getting a mess, if I marked off that effect this round. Whereas here, you can actually have a physical die, in front of you. So you've got to remember to roll that. You've still got to remember to roll it, but it's in front of you. You roll that at the end of the turn. And that to me is a much more sort of physical way of remembering to track those durations.
And it's not just bean counting administration, it's the tedious gameplay where someone will spend 20 minutes working out how many rations they need to make a certain overland journey. In this, you've got you make your best guess at it, but the GM could deplete your rations on a usage die and go, well, in the night rodents got into your pack and ate half your rations. Now you're going to have to rethink your journey because you haven't got the supplies to get you to your destination. It's just this little bit of I just like the uncertainty. Some people just don't want that. They don't like it. They're like, well, I'm going on a journey. I know the journey is going to take 14 days. I will take 14 days rations or whatever and expect them rations to be there. But with the usage die, it gives you the kind of like license without screwing over the players to say, well, for some reason, your rations have run out. Yeah, in a traditional game, you would actually have to bash the players and say, you've been attacked by this, or this has happened, these rations are gone. And there's a kind of it's an adversarial thing.
Do you think it's a system that you would port over to other games?
Well, I was already attached to it from other games, but the science is better in the Black Hack. The way the dice work is better. So, for example, in Numenera, there is the depletion die. So your magical artifact, not your magical artifact, your super science artifacts deplete on a roll of 1. And they might have a depletion die of a D6 or a D20 or even D100, which you roll after use and they deplete on a 1. But that's not nearly so... Well, they just run out on a 1, so it's not nearly. It doesn't track depletion like the usage die does. And I'd actually come up with a version of it for my own games, where I would give it for duration. I would say, okay, this is going to be a D4, D6, D8, or D10 duration. Where what I meant was roll it each round, and when it comes up 1, it's over. But this moving down the dice chain gives you that sense of time passing, of moving through something, even though you don't know exactly when it's going to end. So it's much neater.
Yeah, I think another good thing about it as well is that to use the arrows example again, if you're strictly sort of marking off every arrow, you've either got to mark it off every time you fire one, or you get to the end of the scene and you're like, oh well, I hit this guy and then I did this guy and then I did that. I think I've used about this many arrows. Whereas because you tend to roll usage dice at sort of intervals rather than sort of all the time, it scales down that bookkeeping. But I think a lot of the time, and I mean, I think I mentioned this in my own podcast, is a lot of people say like, "Oh, I don't see why it would reduce bookkeeping," and I think that's because in a lot of games, people don't bother tracking. Like,
that's right.
Ammunition or anything like that. And obviously, if you don't track it, then the usage dice aren't going to sort out your bookkeeping woes for you. But if you do, I think the fact that you only roll the dice at intervals mean you're sort of scaling down the amount of work you have to do.
And you get into this whole business of people going, right, I'm going to go and recover my arrows. And then you need a rule that says you pick up 50% of the arrows you fired. And then, oh, yeah, but it was a naval combat at sea. Oh, okay, so you can't recover your arrows. And it's all like, I'm falling asleep because I'm the fighter and I haven't got a bow.
Whereas this is actually all covered in that usage die roll that you make at the end of the encounter, so all of that's just counted into that roll.
Okay, the next criticism I hear often about the Black Hack is it's no good for long campaigns because of the experience system.
I think the experience system is a strength of it. It's part of what ties in that indie thing that Dave mentioned, and that because you get into talking about your character, and you have to you're supposed to, like, to be able to advance, you've got to come up with a story and recount your tales.
But do you think there's a chance that you could end up with characters with high strength, high agility?
Right. So here's a couple of things. So the first one is, you haven't got any of your cool 5th edition grabbing new powers as you go up, grabbing new abilities. If you're a cleric or a wizard, you'll get new spells, but otherwise you're not going to get new abilities as you go up. So you're only going to get those more interesting things by finding equipment and stuff like that. So that's the first thing. I'm not worried about that. It keeps the game simple all the way through rather than it getting fiddlier as you go up. So that's cool to me. Mm-hmm. The experience system itself is awesome. So the GM awards experiences for milestones. There's a range of different kinds of milestones you can award, and then you need to spend those to level up. So you need one experience to go up to level 2, 2 experiences to go up to level 3. Is that right, Colin?
Yeah.
It's the level you're currently on. 3 experiences. So that keeps it. That will slow it down as you get up to higher levels, and then you actually have to tell a story. You have to tell a story, and you have to spend coin for each experience. So you're actually carousing is built into it. You have to get into your cups and tell the story. I think you should role play the story. We're actually doing that. We're doing that because of the way we're running the campaign. We're doing that on Discord. But the players are telling the stories. So that builds a nice narrative, world building, character building element into the leveling up. There's also a little table you roll there that determines whether something happens while you're carousing. Maybe it costs you a bit more money. Maybe you get to swap your background because you go through some kind of transformation or pick up a new background. So it's got some little, just enough possible surprising elements. But then as you mentioned, whenever you level up, you get new hit points. There are some class things which improve, and then you attempt to roll over. You attempt to roll over your stat, don't you? Your ability, and if you successfully roll over your ability, you can.
So the higher your stat is, the harder it is.
The harder it is.
Exactly. So one imagines there'll be a certain kind of tail off. Certain classes get additional rolls for particular stats. You're only going up to level 10, so it doesn't seem to me that your characters will necessarily get superpowered.
Although if you're lucky like me, you roll to find out your charisma's gone up, then you roll for carousing and find your charisma's gone up again.
Well, that's
inexplicably. So obviously, I did some very charismatic carousing.
So I like the way it's taken some pretty lame stuff from older games and made them a bit new and exciting, like prime requisites, which were always to me a bit duff. Now they're a reroll. Woohoo!
Mhm.
So,
Mhm.
you know, that's fun. That's like, oh, well, I got a much better chance as a thief of getting either my wisdom or my dex up. That totally makes sense to me now. Whereas prime requisites, I was scratching my head. Oh, 10% experience bonus. Oh, that's really exciting. And and like experience, getting that experience and that, they're like proper mechanisms now, aren't they? And they're growing, like you were saying, Dave. You're growing out the world. You're growing out the story. You're not just going, oh, there you go. There's 500 experience points. Go away and do your bookkeeping. It all becomes this proper game.
Really, your characters only grow in that they've had adventures and they've got stories to tell. I can imagine people being nervous about the fact that basically you're dependent on the roll of the dice for your character improvement. I mean, lots of people like to build, don't they? They like to spend points. They like to pick things, but I like that. That's what's old school about this game to me. That you roll the character up, you roll them down the line, you deal with what you've rolled. You can swap one attribute. But that's just kind of what you're in for with this game. That your character is rolled up randomly and.
Okay. Well, the next thing I want to talk about is the equipment. The equipment lists, they're a bit sparse.
Yeah, they're non-existent. It's brilliant. What you've got is, you don't have a shopping list. You don't have a list of prices. You've got a list of suggestions for which cost band things are in, and then the GM rolls within that band to tell you the price of a particular thing. So you go into the shop, what does X cost? Well, this is an exotic item, so I need to roll whatever it is, however many dice it is for an exotic item, and it costs this much, at least for today or in this village.
So I was going to ask, how are you running it? Are you doing it, that's the cost for this day, or is that the cost for this town?
Yeah, we didn't do very much in the last one, but I may even do that's the cost for this particular vendor. As you know, because I've got a town and I've got different vendors. But I think, the suggestion is it's, in this particular settlement or this particular town, this is where the economy's settled.
Because from my point of view with players, how often do you see players around the table flicking through pages and pages of equipment? Oh, right, I've got 12 silver left. What can I get for 12 silver? Get a bit of this. Oh no, that's cheaper. I can get that. It simplifies it a lot, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's like I'm going to tell you what it costs. So there's nothing for you to look at.
It's
also, you get to make
to stop it.
You get to make a charisma roll, and if you're successful in your charisma roll, then I roll that cost with advantage, and if you're unsuccessful, I roll it with disadvantage.
I think it's brilliant. It's just brilliant.
I
love it.
Yeah, we mentioned the sort of monster stats a little bit earlier on, and one of the things I particularly like about it is sort of earlier on in sort of like D&D, as we've talked about previously, the sort of lines between like science fiction and fantasy were a little more blurred, and we saw this in like fighting fantasy as well. The genres weren't so strictly defined, and I'm glad to see that Black Hack sort of gone back to that sort of approach. I mean, if you look in the monster stats, there's the long dead future man in there, which is blatantly like an undead guy in a spacesuit, like leaking radiation. That's great. They've got it's
proper Appendix N. Yeah,
they've got the telepathic gastropod, which is like a mind flayer with the serial numbers filed off. But in the picture, it's wearing this weird sort of semi-futuristic, like exoskeletal suit with like claws on, with like quite a sort of futuristic look to it.
Yeah,
and I like the fact that they've sort of gone back to this. Like, we cannot. It's fantasy. We can have sort of like an astronaut from like the future who's undead, and we can have like a monster in a spacesuit and stuff like that. We don't have to worry about it.
Yeah. And actually, I mean, Dungeon Crawl Classics has got some similar.
Yeah,
it's got some similar beasties in there. But I like that. I think that's a nice nod to Appendix N type source material. And there is that. I mean, we should mention it's a Brit game. He's UK based, and there is again. It's nicely inflected with bearable humour. Do you know what I mean? It's not heavy-handed, but the whole thing has got a nice tongue-in-cheek feel in places. Which again, we talked about this before. It's very hard to get right. I think he just nails it. He just nails it, and that sets up the fun element of the game.
What I do like is the way he's done the initiative test, which in most games, you've got 7 players on the table, each rolls a d6, and then the GM does a countdown, right? Who's going on 7, who goes on 6. With the black hack, whoever rolls under the decks goes before the monsters, and whoever doesn't goes after the monsters. Nice and simple.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's what we saw in Dave's game, where all the combats, even when there was like the one against those undead dogs, or there was lots of them involved, there was lots of us doing different things, all the combats rolled along at a nice sort of lick, and they're very sort of quick. I mean, even when like you weren't involved, you were like, oh, I'm not going to have to wait ages for my turn
and the
to
thing,
get again.
It also gives the player some choice. If 3 of them have rolled under the decks, they can decide between them. Right, you go first, and then I'll go instead of waiting for their number to be called.
Right, yeah, you can. I mean, actually, when we were playing, we didn't, because we were having to handle audio and online and stuff like that. But yeah, you're right. So you can do some tactics.
And the other thing I was going to mention as well was the measurement distance, having 4 range bands. I think I first saw this in Fate, where you've got close, nearby, far, and distant.
Yeah, 13th Age does it as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that idea of sort of zone, sort of.
Yeah.
Mapping, isn't it?
I think it encourages theatre of the mind, doesn't it, as well?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, you really don't need a battle map for this. They nicely give you. I like there's a page which is like a suggested battle map, and it's just a grid.
Yeah.
But fine. But
and a marching order chart.
That's right. Yeah.
You see, I do like the fact that like it'd be very easy to run Black Hat using more traditional like minis or tokens on a virtual tabletop if you wanted to do that.
Yeah.
That's not even a difficult thing to do. There's very little you have to do with it. But by the same token, if you want to run it as theatre of the mind, again, you don't have to really do any work whatsoever. It's all in there for you, and it's one of the few games I can think of that handles both sides of that sort of scale with sort of equal skill, and expertise. Whereas a lot of games do one of those well, not many of them do both of them well.
There's a nice little transition there about the connection with the rest of the sort of old school and material that you might have in your collection. I think that's another strength. Not only does it handle those 2 styles of play, tactical or theatre of the mind, but I think we've said it encompasses the narrative kind of style and the more kind of old school style of play, but it takes your old collection of gaming stuff, and I think it's quite welcoming to all that stuff, because you've got them familiar stats. We were on the Discord the other night talking about monsters, and I'd got Black Pudding, Heavy Helpings. It's the compilation of zines by JV West. I think it's JV West.
Yeah.
And so much in there, it just would drop straight into Black Hack. The random tables, there's character classes that, it's not too much to take the ideas and the essence of these character classes and hack them into the Black Hack monsters in there, and there you go. It's this Black Hack. In the front of the book, he talks about hacking the rules and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And the raft of hacks that have been spawned from this game. There's loads of them.
Yeah,
and I think that's great.
Yeah, and the monsters are so easy to do on the fly. I mean, for a monster, you just need hit dice, basically. You could do a monster that was just its hit dice, because that determines, you can check on a table how much suggested damage it does, but of course you can muck about with that. And then that gives you the relative difficulty. Yeah, so remember we said that players roll under their own stat to avoid the monster's attack. Well, if it's a more powerful foe, if they're level 2 and the monster's level 4, then they add 2 to their roll. They add the difference between the stats. So that looks after, you don't need your bonuses for your monster, any of that. That's all counted in their hit die level. And then no monster in the book has got more than 2 abilities. So they might have an always on type ability, and then they might have an ability that maybe triggers off the attack roll or off some other condition, and that's all they need. Because they're not going to be around very long. Either the monster or the players isn't going to be around very long anyway. Why give them more?
And you got a page or two. You got a page or two, haven't you? And it's the every monster, and that's basically your guide. That's your guide to understanding how monsters work, and shows you how you can do, like you said, do them on the fly, or you could use it to convert monsters, or design monsters more premeditated.
One thing I've noticed, just thinking about it now, if you've read ICRPG, how similar in ethos is ICRPG with Black Hack. You've got the 6 attributes, 6 attributes which you roll against. Usage dice, well, he's got a timer dice. You've got your loot. You've got your zones or your distances.
Ranges,
ranges. There's a lot. Simplified character classes. It's the two both sets of rules are do similar sorts of things in slightly different ways.
Although the tables, the reliance on tables and
tables. We haven't mentioned tables yet, have we?
So that's that DNA. That's that DNA. That common DNA.
Yeah, I was going to say, luckily, we have Spike Pit, the DNA random table historian here with us to tell us how prehistoric man first rolled their stone D20s on random tables with the 2001 music playing in the background.
Well, of course, it all goes back to wargaming. Clearly, Strategos.
Oh, does it, Spike Pit? Does it?
Tell us about it.
Well, I can't. Dave was saying it goes back to Strategos, and we know the stories of Chainmail and original Dungeons and Dragons coming from wargaming and all of that. So that seems to be the lightly shared DNA, but it did all fall out of fashion. Them random tables ran about, I don't know, I want to say the 90s. And then we got this flush of games. So when I was talking about the shared DNA, I was really alluding to a bit more recently. So DNA was probably a little bit strong. But you got Maze Rats, Into the Odds, the Black Hack,
ICRPG,
and a lot of these games popping up around the same time. But it does seem we were talking about the dates, and it seems like it was Into the Odd, then now, then it was the Black Hack because Maze Rats credits the Black Hack in
then Maze Rats, then ICRPG.
Is it the blogosphere? I mean, I was never on Google Plus, right? So I don't know anything about that community. I missed all of that. But I noticed when Froth does his Hump Day Blogorama, he's always finding those blogs with the random tables. Was it an OSR blogging thing that came back? Was that sort of a neat thing that you could do on a blog? Is come up with a random table for this or a random table for that?
There's definitely a strong sort of blogging element to it. I mean, there's always been blogs that have, they want to put up a quick post, so they'll create a quick random table, and obviously there's always new things you can do for random tables, and people are always looking for new ones. People, quite often see people on online communities being like, "Oh, I'm looking for a list of names for this," or "I'm looking for a list of buildings I could have in a city." And I think because there's so many different possibilities you can have in a random table, we all know that the same sort of topics tend to come up every now and again in sort of podcasting, blogging and stuff like that. Whereas because everyone puts their own sort of spin on random encounter tables and stuff like that, even if you've got, say, 3 city encounter tables and you see a 4th one, you'll be like, and it's on a blog, you'll probably be like, well, it's not costing me anything. I'll grab hold of a copy of it because it might have something that the other ones haven't got on because someone different wrote this table. And you can get whole books just full of random tables now. So there must be a certain endearing level of popularity. Otherwise, there wouldn't just be books devoted to them.
It's a good way of expressing your creativity, isn't it? You know, writing a random table.
And we've talked a bit before about how random tables can sort of imply things about fantasy world and stuff like that. Now, if you're doing like a blog, you may not have time to go, right, do you know what, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to produce like a fully functional like campaign world supplement that I'm going to post on my blog. However, you've probably got the time to do a few random tables, and if they come from your own campaign world, they're going to tell
sprinkling
people
it in.
Yeah, they're going to tell people things about that campaign world. It's that implied sort of setting again.
And the creators of these designs, they a lot of the times they're crediting each other in various publications that they've put out. Like you'll see very often the same names cropping up time and time again in the credits. So you know, like they've all been on the blogs, or they've been on the Forge when that was going, or they were on G Plus or something like that. And then they've realised that they've got this common interest, and there's been this kind of cross fertilization of stuff going on, and they're probably play testing as well with each other.
Yeah, I mean, I think as we've said, these things do tend to go in cycles. So if you look at 5th edition, the most recent edition of D&D, that has like random background tables in it. There's like a D100 trinket table you roll on to get like
trinkets. That's right.
For your character. So it's almost as though we went through that. So we started off with the random tables from like your war games and your early D&D and stuff like that, and your fighting fantasy, etc. Then, as Colin said, it sort of dipped and fell out of favour in like the 90s maybe. But now there's been like a sort of resurgence of that sort of coming back up again. So I think it's a case of there's no like really like new ideas, but things sort of fall out of fashion a little bit, and then they come back in again. And I think we're sort of seeing we're sort of going up another sort of peak when it comes to random tables.
I don't know if anybody else is feeling that disturbance in the Force, you know, that I might liken to Alderaan being destroyed by the Death Star, where there's a billion voices crying out, what about 1st edition AD&D DMG and all its tables?
Right, yeah.
I feel we've got to mention
dungeon generators and
yeah, I feel I've got to throw that in there just so that Alderaan doesn't get destroyed. I'm going to rewrite the Star Wars trilogy. Alderaan doesn't get destroyed by the purple worms. We're mentioning AD&D 1st edition DMG, even though I couldn't make head nor tail of it back in the day.
Anybody out there know where we're going to find the earliest dungeon generator? It's going to predate that.
Yeah.
Well, there's clearly one in that 1st edition DMG.
Yeah.
Well, I know. I mean, I don't have a copy of like the 1st edition AD&D DMG, but I know that obviously a lot of that stuff was sort of like retrofitted to go into Osric, and there's a hell of a lot of random tables from your stereotypical sort of, oh, we've got some random monster charts, to things like town inhabitants. There's even like a compiled table section at the back, which has all your normal tables and whatnot on it.
The 1st edition, 1st edition AD&D DMG has got a dungeon generator, hasn't it?
Yeah.
I'm just trying to think if there's.
What about OD&D? Has anybody got the little brown? I never got the little brown books. I don't recall people talking about a dungeon generator in there. I don't think there's one in Holmes Basic. There's not one in. Is there a rudimentary one in BX? I think there is, isn't there? But that's later.
I mean, there's definitely one in Osric.
Right, I've had a quick Google, and apparently there was a 1975 article by Gary Gygax called "Solo Dungeon Adventures," and it was a way to create a randomized dungeon for solo play. and that's the
There
first.
we go.
So there we go. That's where it's come from.
Live fact
Nice
checking.
one, Pete. Yeah.
You can call me Stato.
Diving into the archives there. Yeah.
Plus, guys, looking at these urban and dungeon tables in my Osric book, I've got a couple of words for you. Red light professions table.
Oh, that's infamous, isn't it?
Yeah.
And like, there's like how many entries on there? 50 different types of harlot in it, or something like that.
Oh dear.
It's ridiculous.
There's 21.
Sex sells. Sex sells.
21
entries.
21.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
And those range from wealthy gigolo up to sleepy-eyed trollop.
Oh no. Oh dear.
Wow, 21. Wow. But so getting back round to the Black Hat then.
Was that what we were talking about?
Yeah, I know.
Do
Do you think?
Rats.
Well, we're sort of saying it's all much of a muchness in some ways.
You might say it's got shared DNA.
Shared DNA, in fact.
Well, the question is,
I'm imagining Colin as like a sort of Richard Attenborough now. Like, oh, we found this mosquito frozen in amber, and we extracted DNA from it. When we run it through our computer simulators, welcome to Random Table Park.
so as long as you've got random tables, you can do it with any sort of light system. Then, is that what we're saying?
Yeah, I know we keep banging on about this implied setting thing, but I think it's a great shortcut when it comes to books. If you think about Black Hack, I mean, it's already 124 odd pages long. If they'd have tried to fit like a full sort of campaign world supplement in that as well, they could have easily doubled the size of that book. But the fact is, because they've got the random tables in there, which imply a lot and allow you to intuit the rest, you don't need all of those extra pages for you to get up and running that game.
Yeah, and then random tables. The other thing that I know Dave likes and I like, they even encourage you to, like, as you've used them tables, scrub them out, scrub bits out, and put new entries in when they're getting a bit tired.
Yeah, you don't want to keep rolling the same stuff.
That?
So I think that's brilliant.
What game book says that?
I always quite like that in sort of like dungeon encounters where, like, let's say there's like 5 ogres in the dungeon, like total, and you've got like an ogre as one of the wandering monster things. When you've encountered like all 5 of them, just like crossing that out on the random chart and putting something else in. So later on there might be some more ogres come into the dungeon, whatever, but you know that if you've already encountered 2 as wandering monsters and you've like dispatched them in some way, when you get to like the ogre lair, there's only 3 of them there.
Yeah, and back in the day, them old modules did exactly that.
Yeah,
there'd be a budget of wandering monsters or whatever. And I know even like Chris Goneman's Basic Fantasy, I was looking at some of the modules there, and some people say they're a little bit derivative, but I call them, I think they're a homage to older modules. And they do that. They say, this is your monster list. This is kind of sort of indicates your populations. And as they crop up, cross them off of the master list. And you deplete the host of the dungeon.
I do find it funny when people are sort of saying that, these the adventures for like this are just sort of like ripping off old modules, and then you look at like the current sort of edition of D&D, where every module that comes out is like, we're redoing this for like 5th edition. And it's like, and what?
So yeah, they are, aren't they? They're just digging back through all of it. Other nice bits of design with these tables and dungeon maps in the Black Hack. One nice one is, you don't have to bother describing a whole room, because the players might not even find their way to that room anyway. So what you've done on your dungeon map, you've dropped key things into some of the rooms, but then you have a little side list of dungeon dressing, which you just draw on at the point when you need it. So you can just pull from that list and throw it into the room at the point where a player is paying more attention to the room, or at the point where it seems you need more descriptions. That's a nice little thing. It's a nice little list of dungeons.
Here's a thought for you. When I was working in the early 2000s and we had government cuts, they used to have a saying, do more with less. And we always used to say, you can't do more with less, you do less with less. But thinking about it, with the rule light system, you can actually do more with less, can't you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
well,
I think
players don't feel constrained in their actions, so they're more inclined to do incredibly creative things.
Well, yeah, I think as well, if let's say, just for an example, you've got 4 hours that you're running your session in. If you spend 2 of those hours like wrestling with mechanics or like looking at rules or whatever, you've actually only really got 2 hours where you're actively sort of engaging with like the game fiction, if you want to call it that. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you've got like a rules light system where like within 10 to 15 minutes everyone knows the rules, there's only like the odd little query here and there, you've got vastly more of that time that's actually devoted to the enjoyable bit of the game.
Yeah
it's a masterwork. The design of Black Hack is a masterwork for economy. It shows economy of design and what you can do with the amount you can do with what amounts to really little. I mean, this it seems like quite a chunky book, but it's your monster manual, your DMG, your player's guide, your setting, and so many other things rolled into what really is quite a small book.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed by it, and I'd say to anybody that likes, heavier, more complex games, don't write off the lighter system without taking a look at the Black Hack, because there's so much packed in there. I was impressed with Into the Odd and all that was packed into that, but when I saw the Black Hack second edition in particular, it blows my mind what they've got in there, and it invites you to add more all the time, and it's easy to do that. That's what I love. You can just bring your game to it.
Do you know what, Colin?
Bring to it. Yep.
2 episodes ago, we were recommending people not to buy something. I think we've evolved, and we're now saying, if you can, go out and buy the Black Hack.
Yeah, I'll say that. Like Jason says buy it. Worm says buy it. Yeah.
That's 4 thumbs up, or 4 worms haven't got thumbs, have they? I don't know what we hold up then.
It's consumed by the purple worm. I don't know.
Okay.
Well, I think that's pretty much it for the Black Hack. I'm sure we'll probably mention it, and no doubt random tables in future episodes. So from Colin, Pete, Dave, and myself, till we see you next time, have fun whenever you're playing, and watch out for those purple worms. We'll see you soon. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.